With the rapidly growing popularity of Sonic the Hedgehog in 1991, it didn't take long for the IP to branch out, and with the addition of new games, shows, and even comics, the fanbase was introduced to an ever-expanding cast of characters who would help fight evil alongside the speedy blue hedgehog. Now, this expanded cast of characters would bring something rather new to the table. When it came to the games, we got to either play alongside Sonic or view things from a totally different perspective than his. These new characters, for the most part, played differently than Sonic did in the games, giving them a very unique feel. When it came to the shows and comics, we were given a cast that was fully fleshed out and realized with different motivations and personalities. While these are all welcome additions to most, there has always been a small crowd who seemingly despise these additional characters and feel that Sonic has, quote, too many friends. This might be something that you've heard ad nauseum at this point, as it's been regurgitated through game journalists and YouTubers alike. But it got me wondering, is there any truth to this statement? Does the addition of characters in the Sonic universe detract from the story or gameplay in any shape or form? And most importantly, why are Sonic's friends so hated? I've always thought that this was a silly take. To me, Sonic's friends just add so much to the world and games that they're a part of. But hey, at the end of the day, everyone is entitled to their own opinion. Still, Sonic is the only franchise where I see side characters getting shade thrown their way for simply existing. The only franchise that even comes close is Star Wars with characters like Jar Jar, but even then, it's more so that people find Jar Jar annoying and don't have a problem with the sheer number of characters in the story. And why is that? The Star Wars fandom doesn't seem to get mad when side characters like Admiral Akbar, Lando, or Wedge Antilles are introduced. These characters go on to help our main character Luke, and without them, the Death Star 2 wouldn't be destroyed. Or what about franchises like Lord of the Rings? The central character of both the books and movies is Frodo Baggins, and the Fellowship plays a supplementary role to him. Without the friends that Frodo makes along his perilous journey to Mordor, his quest to save Middle-earth would have been futile. And though there are flaws in our heroes that help Frodo on his journey, we as the audience or readers still deeply care about them. So I find it strange that a small yet loud subset of fans, game critics, and journalists look down upon Sonic's friends in both the comics and games, especially since Sonic's friends fill a similar function. I want to understand why, not for the sake of arguing or trying to sway them into liking the side characters, but perhaps to find some middle ground. So like I mentioned, side characters in most franchises help our protagonist along their journey. Sonic, being our protagonist, has often been helped by his friends in order to save the world, yet they still receive a lot of backlash. I think that a lot of this stems back from the 3D games that incorporated more than just Sonic himself. Starting with the adventure games, Sonic Team got very ambitious, creating multiple characters with different playstyles, movesets, animations, and stories. Introducing such a large amount of playable characters can both be a good thing and a bad thing. For many like me, we enjoy playing as characters like Knuckles and seeing his journey to restore the Master Emerald and uphold the tradition of his ancestors by keeping it safe. Or seeing Tails as he steps out from the shadow of Sonic, overcoming his own fears and becoming a hero, rather than being relegated to a sidekick. It's these types of stories that make these characters so compelling to us. Not only do we see their personalities fleshed out, but we also see them grow and overcome adversity, whether it be an internal or external struggle. On the flip side, there are characters introduced in these games that, to some, might have less compelling stories and gameplay that ends up being a detriment to the game itself. For example, many don't enjoy the Big the Cat sections from Sonic Adventure, and I can't fault them for this. Big's gameplay is a stark contrast to any other characters. It slows the fast pace that the game has already established at this point by making the player complete fishing minigames that really don't control the best. This can turn people away from the character instantly just based on the premise of bad game design. And while Big's story isn't terrible, and I personally enjoy seeing how far Big would go in order to save his friend Froggy, it's probably the least compelling of the bunch. I can totally understand why someone would think the addition of Big the Cat is too much in this game, and maybe begin to think that there are too many characters in this game in general. This trend unfortunately carries over to other games. In Sonic the Hedgehog 2006, Silver gets a really interesting story arc in his debut as he comes back in time from the future in order to restore the world. And while while his story is compelling, his gameplay can be conceived as considerably worse than both Shadow's and Sonic's, where it once again slows the pace of the game and has finicky controls. I'm sure that this has caused people to turn away from Silver as well, regardless of how good his story is. Now, personally, I enjoy both Big and Silver in these games. I think that the fact that they have different gameplay makes them unique, and it's a fun change of pace, but I do see where others come from with their complaints of these characters. I've always thought that the addition of characters apart from Sonic himself have been a fun part of the franchise, and I like to see what moves these characters can pull off. Having multiple playable characters with vastly different movesets has always set the Sonic franchise apart from other games in my opinion, and it's a shame that the feedback after 06 relegated the games to only including Sonic, that is, up until the release of the Frontiers DLC. If Sonic Team wants to add more characters into the games again, I think that really taking their time to polish gameplay for side characters, making sure that the experience doesn't detract from the overall feel of the game, would be a great place to start. If they can pull that off, then I think it would go a long way to helping people enjoy Sonic's friends more. When I first got into the Sonic franchise, I saw myself relating a lot to Sonic after watching the movie. Not because I'm a speedy blue hedgehog, but because he had a lot of attributes and values that correlated with my own. I've always been drawn to characters that are free spirits much like Sonic, but what I value most is Sonic's compassion that he demonstrates to others. Much like Superman and Spider-Man, it's Sonic's kindness and willingness to help others that I believe makes him a true hero. However, not everyone is going to relate in the same way even if they enjoy the series. Which is why I think it's so great that Sonic has such a huge cast. There's bound to be a character that you're drawn towards or relate to in some way because they're all written so differently from each other. And that's a big reason why I will never believe that Sonic has too many friends. I know a ton of people that like Sonic as a character, but they enjoy other characters in the franchise more, like Shadow. You might find him more relatable, as his personality is a stark contrast from Sonic's, or maybe you just find his design to be more visually interesting. Like I said, there's bound to be a character that you find yourself drawn to, and it's these secondary characters that enrich the world that Sonic's stories are told in. And because of this, we get their stories fleshed out as they intersect with Sonic's. But an argument that I hear a lot is that with the abundance of characters introduced in these stories, others are going to be left behind and forgotten. Many like to point out characters like Silver and Blaze, who haven't received much, if any time at all, in the games after 06. And while this is true and very disappointing, this is one reason why I think the IDW comics are so great. Those characters who maybe we don't get to see as much in the games, like Mighty, Ray, or the Chaotix, all get storylines in the comics. So I wouldn't say that they've been forgotten, but rather the journey that those characters are on are expanded in the comics until we see them return in the games. But to quell this feeling, which ties in with my first point, is that Sonic Team needs to make an effort to have these characters playable. While we don't need a huge cast in the game, bringing back 2 or 3 characters at a time would let the fans know that they haven't forgotten about these characters they introduced to us. I think the main issue that people have with these characters being sidelined stems from the dark ages of the series, where after Sonic 06, Sonic Team was too afraid of putting these characters back into the games. But now with Sonic at an all-time high and Sonic Team showing us that they're willing to include more characters, there's a real chance that we see more side characters expanded upon soon. While there is the group that dislikes additional characters because they think the stories won't be expanded upon like I just mentioned, there are also those that hate the new characters because the bridge is burned by older ones. And what I mean by this is that it seems that fans of the Archie comics as well as the IDW comics like to butt heads with each other. It's almost like if you enjoy one run, then there's no room for the other, or at least that's what some of these fans make it feel like. While Archie Sonic and IDW Sonic vary wildly from each other in terms of story, characters, and art, there is room to like both. It doesn't have to be one or the other. I'll often see that fans of the older Archie comics have a personal beef with the original IDW creations. I cover a lot from the IDW comics, and I'll constantly see comments bashing the new characters because they like the older ones that no longer see the light of day. And look, I get it, I really do. With Archie losing the license to Sonic, years upon years of characters and storytelling was just abandoned in an instant, and that's got to really sting. It's very similar to what Disney did with the Star Wars EU when they purchased it, but I think instead of harboring animosity towards IDW, the fans should cherish what was a long run of that universe and characters that were loved by the fans. It's okay to like both and accept the original characters from both series, but I believe that a reason why the IDW characters receive a decent amount of hate is that there's still a lot of bitterness and emotion tied to the past. And like I said, I do understand that, but I think that pouring the hate onto the new projects is really unfair. Overall, it's a very small subset of fans that don't enjoy Sonic's friends, and look, it's gonna be impossible to appease everyone. For the most part, these are beloved characters, and the biggest issue that most people seem to have is that we don't see these characters enough. While bad gameplay and dropped storylines might have caused some people to dislike Sonic's cast of characters, for the most part, we're all clamoring to see them again. I think the Sonic movies prove that Sonic's friends aren't hated, but rather we want to see them and their stories evolved on. I remember in the theater how loud it got when Tails appeared for the first time, or how much people were laughing when Knuckles was on screen, or even how excited we all are right now to see Shadow in the third film. So maybe at the end of the day, Sonic's friends aren't hated because he has too many of them, but it seems that they're just missed. That's all I have for you guys right now. Thank you so much for watching. Check out this video here for more Sonic lore, and make sure you're subscribed to stay up to date on all things Sonic. As always guys, I'm wishing you all the best. Take care. Peace.